So I'd like to welcome everyone to our 15th annual Cocky Award. Delighted that we have two folks from Saatchi Saatchi who created not only it's a Tide ad, but it's a Tide ad again, and it's yet another Tide ad, and it's yet another Tide ad again. Before I have our two honorees come up, I'm going to just give a 2-minute quick review of what commercials have won in the past and what happened on Super Bowl Sunday. And I think you'll recognize the music.
I need everyone to say hello to Saatchi on my Instagram account, okay? So let's do it. When I say, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Saatchi! There we go. Good.
Thank you for having us. We're really excited to present to you guys. We met a few of you beforehand, so feel free to interrupt us anytime if you have questions or want to know something that we might not talk about. We can keep this as open as you guys want. So we heard you want us here to talk about Tide Ad. But first we heard you guys might want to know a little bit more about how an ad agency works. So as she said, I'm in account management. So the client services role, I deal with the marketing team at Tide and then managing all of the other departments at Saatchi Saatchi to deliver the best creative, but also making sure my clients are happy with what they get. And Daniel.
And what we do is we work with copywriters, art directors, creative directors, the executive creative directors, the chief creative officers, and amongst all of us, we come up with the idea and how it's going to work and how it's going to. We collaborate with all the other departments in the agency, and we make the idea happen. It's really, you'll see, we've brought enough to explain you the process, but if you have any question about that right now, it would be a great moment to ask it because we're going to go deep into how we made this happen.
We're actually going to start from last year, though, which we obviously didn't win last year. I don't know if we should be offended or not. But it really set the groundwork for where we ended up this year with Tide Ad. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bradshaw Stain, but this really set the bar for us for where we got to last year. It won lots of awards and got a record high household penetration for our brand, which is super important to deliver on their business needs, and also, again, amazing creative. So we'll go through, we started with this, we worked really closely with the Fox Network to be able to have this promo happen.
Coming up on the halftime show, the one and only Lady Gaga performed for all you little monsters out there. And speaking of little monsters, TV and the guys, they'll break down the first half of the game.
Yeah, don't miss it, America. Me and Lady Gaga. Where can you possibly go wrong, right?
The Atlanta Falcons during the regular season rushed for over 120 yards per game. That was good for 50.
So that was all Fox. You didn't see any Tide in that. We just seeded something on Terry's shirt. We started a little bit of the conversation, had enough influencers or the NFL Network say, hey, Bradshaw, what do you have on your shirt? And then about 7 minutes later, we came back with this commercial.
Baby, you gotta clean that shirt. Oh, I need a shirt. I know. You're trending. Trending? You're Terry. Take mine. Where's wardrobe? I'm trending. I gotta text that. Bradshaw. We got a Bradshaw release.
Hi. You got Do you think we could probably check out the game?
Search for fresh
Hey, Terry. It's not what's on here that counts. It's what's in here. Really? I don't know.
Where was I?
And so tons of people were talking about it once they realized that Tide was behind it. They were like, you got us, this was great. Everyone was talking about Bradshaw Stain. Everyone went to go watch the video, really connected with the broadcast and blurred the lines between broadcast and advertising, which was set the bar really high for us. And then we even came back again in the fourth quarter with this.
Stay tuned after the game for post-game analysis.
I'm gonna get that out.
Only one way I know, Kurt.
No. You get your own.
Tide. Nothing cleans better.
So that's what we had worked on a year ago and said, how could we possibly beat that? Our clients came back with a really open brief that said, just become the most loved brand of the Super Bowl again and get people talking even more than they did with Bradshaw Stain.
Which was a huge challenge to all of the people in this. You can see the suffering in that man's corner. That's our executive creative director. But everyone here, it took a global team to come up with this idea that's in Saatchi right now, in Saatchi, New York right now. And it's people from Peru, like myself, from Argentina, from Italy, obviously from the US, who I'm missing, Australia and Brazil. And all of us on the creative side panicked because we knew that Bradshaw Stain was such a big campaign that won so many awards that we were like, okay, how could we possibly beat that, right? So the brief was, again, to focus on Stain because it had been so successful last year, hacking off the Super Bowl with a stain, that we all went there, right? And we didn't stop looking about stains, and there were rounds after rounds after rounds of creative work presented to creative directors, the ACDs, and the CCO, trying to get a really good stain idea on how to remove a stain.
Yeah, it's been in Tide's history for just our general everyday commercials that you'll see on TV. Always focuses on stains, removing stains, toughest stains, our past Super Bowl successes with Talking Stain and Miracle Stain and Bradshaw Stain, all our stains. So delivering to our clients something that was outside of stains might be difficult.
Yeah, and not only that, but it just didn't feel like it was a great follow-up to what had happened last year. It's like we were not gonna be able to beat a hacking or a ruse like that if we focus on stains. So on a Sunday, in a moment of desperation.
I have a quick question
Yeah,
before
sure.
you move on. How many spots were created
Oh, we'll get there.
before we ended up on the one you got?
We'll get there, don't worry. So a guy from Italy, who's the art director in the project, on a Sunday, in a moment of clearly crisis after many weekends of working through this, said, hey, what if instead we focus on the clean clothes because they're in all the other commercials? And then we all went like, that's it. Clean is everywhere. It's so obvious. It's there. We just don't notice. Like, we take it for granted. And that's where it kind of, everybody went like, oh, what if we make the ad that focuses on clean. And that was like, everybody felt in the room that it was the right thing to do.
And it was also such a true insight, as you said. As soon as you said it out loud, you're like, oh, that makes sense. You take for granted that you have clean clothes. You might not notice it, you don't pay attention, but of course you notice when there's a stain. And that was the insight from last year of when you notice a stain, it changes everything, and no stain should deserve the fame and take away from what you're doing. But this insight worked just as, if not stronger.
So, how does that work in the Super Bowl? Because the first spot almost wrote itself, right? Like, look at the stain, look at the stain, look at the stain. It's a tie dye. What else could it be? It's a tie dye. But then how do you make it something beyond one commercial? Because we felt that we needed to do something bigger than just a 30-second spot pointing to clean clothes. So we went into the same hack mentality that we had last year, or that the team had last year, and we decided we had to point out clean clothes not only in our commercial, but go beyond and try to hack the whole Super Bowl, and not even in a way that is like, oh, here's bait, like the Bradshaw stain, where it's like, here's some bait, everybody goes like, oh, look at that stain, here's Tide and cleans it up. But really, we were having some trouble when we tried to explain the idea after it happened, because before it was really simple. It's like, you notice clean is in every ad, therefore every ad is a Tide. That's easy. But what happened after the Super Bowl aired, we were like, oh, I guess we hacked people's brains in a way, because we throw it out there, and then we came back 3 more times, and people were like, oh yeah, now I'm seeing everything like a tie-dye. At least that's what happened on Twitter, right? Let's go with Twitter as a measure.
So to your question, there were lots of scripts, lots of rounds of presentations to the brand team, lots of scripts that I think we counted 225 pages in a deck before it even made it to people like me, to people like our clients.
Because in the spot that you're about to see, we had many situations in which our main character could say, this is not this kind of ad, look at the clean clothes, this is a Tide ad. But then we had to come up with what happened afterwards, right? So what were the other spots we could do where it felt like another commercial from another brand or a Super Bowl trope or something like that we turned into a Tide ad. And that was like, how many creatives are 15 creatives in the team that we were writing, no, this is not good enough, no, this is not good enough. Should it have an ending? Should it have a wrap-up? Should it not have a wrap-up? What's the next one? What's a good follow-up? So there's an Old Spice spot in the program. There were 15 versions of that commercial, and we wrote it until the day of the shoot, where we decided to change 3 more things there as we were shooting. So we didn't stop writing until way after we had shot the thing, and we were still tweaking here and there. So, there were lots of scripts.
And as you mentioned, we needed brand partners, so we realized that this program didn't quite work unless you really were hacking other ads, and we needed brand partners that weren't going to sue us for hacking their ads. So we started in a pretty obvious place. Tide is part of Procter & Gamble, so we looked at were there going to be other P&G brands in the Super Bowl, were there P&G brands who had been in the Super Bowl in previous years. So both Mr. Clean and Old Spice had pretty iconic ads. Mr. Clean last year, him dancing with the mop was super iconic, and then Old Spice, the man your man could smell like, Isaiah, I'm on a horse. That was another one where we were like, hey, can we go to those brand teams and do something with those ads, whether get their assets or reshoot them, as we ended up doing, to really look like we interrupted real ads. And then Budweiser was a bonus. We had a brand connection to one of their brand managers, and they said, sure, yeah, we'll give you some Clydesdales footage, and which is super iconic in the Super Bowl. I saw they've won many awards in the past from you guys, so it was great to get to use their assets and really look like we were hacking outside of just our small P&G.
But from an advertising nerd standpoint, right? All the creatives were crazy about, okay, how many ads can we cram into this thing, right? How many genres can we mock? Could we, when Old Spice came to it was on the table, and we're like, oh, we can do Old Spice. That's amazing. We can do Old Spice. So how do we do Old Spice and do it to a point where it's fun, just like the work that Old Spice has done, that clearly is not done by our agency. So, because Wyden has the account, how do we borrow from Mr. Clean, and where's the right moment to hack that commercial? So there was a lot of excitement in the creative department, because suddenly we had this box, and that sandbox kept getting bigger and bigger, because it's like, oh, here are 2 more Procter & Gamble brands you can play with, and we're like, oh, amazing, and people won't know they're a Procter & Gamble brand, so they will think we hacked Old Spice, which is fantastic, right? Now, what's the best way to do that? So there was a lot of excitement and a lot of detail that went into that we're gonna show you with one example, which is the Old Spice one later, how much we focused on the tiny little details to make it work.
And then Daniel.
Oh,
the
yeah.
It was too funny not to
Yeah,
do.
because like I said, there were many foreigners working on this project. Like our CCO is from Argentina. And one thing that's very particular about US advertising is the pharma ads, which I think they're hilarious. Like I could look at them forever. When you see like, oh, there's happy people, and then, oh, I had this back pain. And then you see a person that is fine again, playing tennis or something, or golf, and then you hear like all this legal copy over and over again, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's very American. So we were thinking, how do we take that and put it into the Super Bowl? Because that would be like the biggest thing you could, like the most mischievous thing you could pull off. Is like, not only did we hack everything, we went and kind of mocked that genre of advertising. That how many times do you see a pharma ad on the Super Bowl? And if it's, like, so we were very mischievous in that sense of how much can we push the boundaries of playing with this very American thing and making it ours through the tag thing. So.
And we got to have fun with our own legal supers that so many times we don't want to talk about what 10 times the cleaning power means in a legal super, have to explain it in our ad. So getting to do that intentionally in a fun way was pretty cool for Ted. Clients finally approved. The brands were on board.
Yep.
And then we need a media plan to support it all. So I was asking some of our clients who have talked to junior clients and asking them what they thought the hardest thing was about the Super Bowl, and no one really thought about how hard the media plan could have been. So we had this whole idea in our head of, we're going to have 5 seconds. All of these are just going to be quick interruptions because we have to remind them so many times throughout the Super Bowl, it's a Tide ad. And we went to NBC this year and said, can we have 5s? Can we have 7s? Can we have 10s? They said, nope, NFL rules, we don't tell you that. We're like, all right, well, then we're out. We don't want to do this. This doesn't work for our plan. We need to come and remind people so many times. And if you won't let us do it, we're not going to do it. So we had lots of negotiations back and forth with them, ultimately got to the 45 in the first quarter, 3 15s. We split up one of our 15s into 7.5, so it looked maybe like 2 ads. And then they gave us some bonus media of the billboards you guys saw. So that was the opportunities we had to get 5s in, even though they wouldn't sell us 5-second commercials. And it was not cheap or easy. Then we needed a face.
Right.
Not cheap or easy either.
No, not cheap or easy. But there's a very funny story here. Everyone had an idea of who that face could be in the creative department. And then as we were looking through all the candidates and some people were not available or were committed to other brands or something like that, the daughter of our chief creative, I don't know if this is on camera, whatever. The daughter of our chief creative officer said, hey, what about the guy from Stranger Things? And we were like, oh, what about the guy from Stranger Things? And there was no, after that, we did the research, but there was no like, oh, look at his followers and the data and all of this, let's pick him. It was like a hunch thing, which really there was a lot of that in this process where it's like, oh, pharma's funny, let's do funny. Like whenever we hit a roadblock, Javier, our CCO, will come and say, this is your thinking. You're not trying to be funny. When you're done thinking, go to funny. Like trust your instinct, go for funny. And that many decisions throughout the process were done like that. Then, of course, once we said David Harper, we did go and see, okay, how many Twitter followers does he have? Like, is this really a thing? Then Dancing Hopper happened, and it was like, oh, that's perfect.
And this had come out like right before the Super Bowl too, that he had taken the senior photos with this girl, and it was on Good Morning America. But he was the perfect balance for us in terms of had this following and had this. People knew him from Stranger Things, but wasn't too famous that he wasn't going to be easy to work with or was going to overpower what we were trying to do with Ty, but really fit in to deliver our brand message, but in a really funny, lovable way.
He's like cool, and he has like gravitas, and he's like a cool, dark dad. Like it's this weird character that you're like, I can't pinpoint exactly what makes him cool, but okay, it's like he was perfect for this. So we went for David.
And it was his first commercial ever. So that was really interesting for us to get to work with him on his first brand experience. He was used to working for Netflix where you have a lot more free range, an episode doesn't have to be an exact time length, so getting him to work with this is the language you have to say for the brand purposes, or this has to fit in 15 seconds.
Because maybe we should talk about that a bit more. Like, this is the thing you will see as you grow in your career. These kind of things have a million eyes on a tiny monitor like this, right? So we're shooting whatever we're shooting, and David is doing whatever David is doing, and in a different place, there's how many clients were in the shoot?
Probably 6 or 7
6
came
clients,
with. This is a big shoot. Yeah.
4 creatives, 2 of our bosses, everybody looking at David like, what is he doing? Did he say it right? Did he move his eyebrow? And we're like, did he look at the clothes in the right place? Did he point? Did he not point? Can we get another take? And then having an actor like him who has never done a commercial suddenly being not doing his thing like he does with Stranger Things, but really trying to make all of this thing work and not lose his character was something that we think he did with a smile, really. He was like, he has a style, of course, but he was really committed to making this work because he felt it was the right idea for him to do his first commercial.
Yeah, and he said he doesn't want to sell soap. He probably won't be in other commercials. That for him, this really fit his character and his personality. He felt like he got to be the god during the Super Bowl and pull all the strings behind the scenes. So really fit to have a partner so on board with what our idea was.
Right.
And for fun, this is how he thanked the brand team. He said, "Thanks for ruining my career by putting me in the most popular commercial of 2018."
So you can imagine how this shoot went, right? Like,
So we couldn't give away our idea. A little bit of the same thing from last year, that you need people to be surprised by what's happening and get the idea during the Super Bowl. And everyone starts talking about the commercials now before the Super Bowl. So our PR team, our brand teams are like, well, how are people going to know that Tide's in the Super Bowl if we don't release the spot ahead of time?
and this is really important because if we said anything about clean clothes at any point whatsoever or where our idea might go, tweets would have been ready. There would have been an army of copywriters in the competitions agency, in Persil, in wherever, just writing tweets and being like, we're going to answer back and we're going to have this whole program and we're going to let you get away with it, Tide. So we had to divert attention, right? Like, we signed the whole
Everyone signed
like a
NDAs
paper
to not talk about
we
it.
can't
Yeah.
talk about it, we couldn't mention it, we couldn't think about it, we just had to do it. So
And also, we didn't want anyone going to the network saying, hey, if Tide's trying to claim ownership of all these spots during the Super Bowl, but we've paid for this spot,
Right.
that's not really fair. Since we had the network on board the whole time with doing this, we didn't want anything to get in our way from that. So we teased David Harper instead. So now you guys are familiar with Bradshaw. We used him to tell everybody that he wasn't in the Super Bowl this year and then introduce David Harper. So I don't know how many of you guys saw this, but I'll play these.
were playing online the week leading to the Super Bowl.
And I think in like 2 media spots on TV.
Right. That's not playing time. Ooh.
Hey guys. Hey, who's got a key? What do you lock me out for?
And then this ran right the week before the Super Bowl. So at that point, we're like, okay, it's close enough that if we announce David Harper but don't really say what he's doing, people know he's going to be in the Super Bowl. He knows that he's going to be our partner in the Super Bowl, but not giving away what the idea was.
Hey, what's going on here?
I'm shooting a tie ad for the Super Bowl.
Shooting a tie ad.
Yeah, apparently last year the guy who did it really dropped the ball.
Really? Yeah, what they say?
Yeah, that's what they said.
So you guys can imagine how fun it was to work with the two of them. We had a couple publications on set and did behind the scenes interviews with them as well. So we had enough of a conversation going before the Super Bowl.
And these were shot like in 2 hours. Like these were shot like super quick. It was like,
Yeah.
we have a break in between 2 things we're doing. Terry, trailer, 2 cameras, go. Blah, 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 edit, done. It was like super quick because we'll tell you about the 4 days shoot later, but we had to shoot 4 ads.
Everything.
But it's really the commercial that launched the idea has 16 different sets within that same commercial, so it felt like shooting many commercials at the same time. So then February 4th, we turned every ad into a Tide ad, and before Jen plays it, you need to understand, we were watching this at a war room, right, with all the Twitter people, and everybody must have a different experience of how this night went, but after editing and everything that went through in order to make this happen, the only thing I was praying for was this not to run right before that Peter Dinklage
Mountain Dew,
Doritos thing, because it was so popular online that I was like, please no, please just no, not before that one. So then that thing starts playing, and I tell Jen, are we next? Because we were sitting together watching the screen, and she's like, no, we're one after this, and I'm like, does a Mountain Dew count as one commercial and Doritos as another one? Because if not, we're right after this, and we were right after this. So all I did was not watch the TV, and I started watching Twitter. I was like, if it sticks on Twitter, we did it. I've seen the commercials way too many times right now in order to see it one more time. So then, this is what we heard, right?
Yeah, just a typical Super Bowl car ad. Right?
Or a hilarious beer ad.
Or whatever ad this is.
Whatever.
But it's a Tide ad.
What? It's a Tide ad.
What makes it a Tide ad?
There are no stains. Look at those clean clothes. What else would this be an ad for? A razor?
No, a Tide ad.
Cold, refreshing.
Tide ad.
Meet the all-new.
No, it's a Tide ad. Tide.
So, does this make every Super Bowl ad a Tide ad?
I think it does. Watch and see.
So there are a lot of little things in that one. I don't know if you want to talk about it now.
I think we'll go through the production process, so we'll show you
Okay.
some behind the scenes and rough cuts and kind of how we got to these final spots. We wanted to remind you what ended up airing. So this was in the first quarter, 45 seconds, and then we came back in the second quarter with our second spot.
Hello again, ladies. Is your man the kind of man who would climb the height? I'm in a Tide ad.
Nice pants.
Get off my horse.
Tide ad.
And then again in the third quarter.
Beautiful. Like a Tide ad.
Sarah.
It's a Tide ad.
So this one-two punch was really funny because they said you can have 15 seconds, and we said, can we break it into 7.5, and they were like, okay. So we were like, this happened in edit. We had two versions of this that could run separately, and then suddenly we were like, oh no, we only have 15 seconds that we can't split up, so we're just gonna do a one-two punch and then pray that it works, and it did. So.
And then, as I mentioned before, we worked closely with the network to try and get this extra media. So we had 2 billboards run. This was the one.
For counts of the game without the consent of NFL Productions is prohibited.
Welcome back to another Tide ad.
Moyesa Irigoyen, the winner this year's.
And then to wrap it up in the fourth quarter.
Sometimes the signs are hard to ignore. Whenever you see clothes this clean, that's a Tide ad.
Clean clothes may be an indication of a Tide ad. Tide users experience 10 times more cleaning power. Tide is America's #1 detergent in America.
So that's a dream come true.
But we really needed all of our media spots to work together. I think we had about 100 seconds, and that was as much as the Amazon Alexa spot ran as one, and we used ours a lot smarter, at least we think, to set up the idea, make sure people understood it, and then remind them enough times throughout the game that made people laugh, and then really understand, like, oh my God, is everything really a Tide ad? Like, I had friends be like, I don't know what I'm watching anymore because every time I see a commercial, I'm waiting to see if David Harper comes.
That's a cool thing that happened on Twitter too, is that everyone started saying, oh, it's a Tide ad, Star Wars trailer, oh, that's a Tide ad too. And then they started doing this, and it was like, okay, that's fun. It's fun that that happened, because if that had not happened, okay.
They probably wouldn't be here.
Cool.
As I said, you're probably wondering how we got there. So we found a production partner. We actually used the same production company and directors we did last year for Bradshaw's Dane. They really loved working with us, and we loved working with them. And they had an understanding of how crazy Super Bowl productions can be, and how crazy our clients can be, and how crazy we can be, and making sure that we were able to deliver what we needed to. So we spent a week in LA.
2 weeks, actually.
2 weeks.
Yeah, and then, like I
10
said,
days.
we kept writing. It's not like the client approved and it was like, okay, guys, go shoot this, have fun. It was like, let's look at every detail. Let's look at every detail and make every detail work. So, can we tell behind? We can, right?
Sure.
Okay, so the farm ad was the ending of the 45. The ending of the 45, where they're sitting in a living room, was the last commercial because it felt more like Tide. So we were thinking, should we end like Tide or should it end like Pharma? There were a million moving pieces. What if Budweiser drops out at the last minute? What replaces that? So we had to shoot extra stuff that you would never see in order to replace the Budweiser one. So it was like 15 different pieces that you just kept juggling and representing to the client, and we were on the phone with them the day of casting. So most of the people that appear in the commercials, we had to see at midnight in a little monitor, trying to understand if they were the right ones. We couldn't cast them like you normally would, where you meet the actors and you realize what they're all about. We were selling parts of the script while that was happening. So it was 2 weeks in which they were very interesting, really, but they were very exhausting in the sense that, okay, so what if the Coke thing? What if there's some scene in which they seem like they're in a soda commercial? What if a soda advertiser decides to come against us and say, no, you can't run that because we bought a soda spot? Okay, what do we do then?
Which ended up happening, but we figured
But
it
we
out.
decided to figure it out. So there were a bunch of things that were up in the air, even during the edit. So we wrote a lot.
Yeah, and you only have so much time each day normally with a production company, and then especially having a celebrity or multiple celebrities in this cases, they have really strict timelines of when their agents are gonna walk them off set, or it costs lots more money. So we really had to make sure everything we wanted to get and all the backups we wanted to get fit within it, and we also didn't tire David out because we needed him for 4 days.
And there was one more thing. Every single fake brand in that first spot has a logo and a visual identity and a product that makes it look like it was a real product. So the beer ad has a bottle that has a logo that our art directors from Saatchi were obsessing about. So every time a script changed and it was like, oh no, we're not doing beer anymore, they will be like, okay, and then we will have to do a different design for whatever we came up with, and then they'll show that and be like, no, we're not doing that anymore, that changed 10 minutes ago. So there was a bit of that, but at the end I still have the fake toothpaste that we never did in my desk at the office. I have one of the bottles of the fake soda that you never saw the close-up of, but we have it there. So there's a bunch of stuff like that you need. It's details, really. That's where the creative department, I'm glad we were so many people involved in this, because everybody was after one detail that they loved and that they put all their effort to make work.
So we shot all of the 4 spots that ran on TV, the billboard that ran on TV, and then also the pre-seed spots, all in 4 days in LA together. And it was 3 weeks before the Super Bowl. So we shot this the week of January 15th, which is crazy to some people that we do it so close to the game, but it also helps for things like the billboard and stuff like last year, where you want to know the teams in the game. You have to shoot the scenario, so even 2 weeks before, you know the 4 teams left, they can choose their home or away jerseys. So at that point, you're shooting so many iterations of all these jerseys, and so it's better to have the least amount of variables, and then also kind of makes everyone work super close together, especially our clients, that we just have to work together, buy something, and finish it because we only have so much time. Show you some fun behind the scenes. A lot of the stuff had been on green screen. This was the clam scene, the fragrance ad. So we really built, that was probably like a 3-foot clam on a stage that David Harper could fit into and have to bend down every time. And there's someone, I don't know if you can see, like someone pulls the string that lifts the top.
There's
for it
a
to
guy
happen.
here moving a thing, like an old pole, so that the thing opens. And that green screen just allowed us to then decide what will go behind. And because we hadn't yet. We knew, we kind of had an idea that it would be the ocean somehow, or a perfume looking thing, but we didn't know exactly how it's gonna look. So that was a detail for later. As you can see, there is no horse that holds 2 people, so There's only one horse, and we kind of did our movie magic there to make it happen.
So we edited like crazy. We can show you some of the rough cuts, so you'll see the very first cut that the editor had done with the team before it went to the client, before it was cut down to a 45, before all of the CGI was put in to fill in the background.
No one has seen this. You need to understand only 4 people in the world have seen this, and then we decided to bury it and
Just your typical Super Bowl car ad? Or a hilarious beer ad. Or whatever ad this is. But it's a Tide ad. What makes it a Tide ad? There are no stains. Look at those clean clothes. What do you think this would be an ad for? Like a razor? Aftershave. Tide ad. Full ad? Okay. Hi! Seems like only yesterday. No. Tide. Does this make every Super Bowl ad a Tide ad? Maybe.
very different.
So as he said, there's all of those scenes we had shot with some sort of backup in mind because that gave us the ability to play in the edit. So that Budweiser, since they approved it, we ended up getting them as a 7.5 versus the ending, but we thought about putting it in the 45 in case we didn't. Played with the Mai Tide, we played with, there were other scenes in there that didn't make it into the 45 because it wasn't as funny if you had so many.
Right. Then there's things that we did on post-production that this is the thing, I don't know how many of you will be on the creative side, but whoever ends up there, overshoot, always. So it's like, he was doing the clam thing or whatever this is, and then we were like, if there's green screen, they had stopped shooting, and it was like, if there's green screen, me and Max, the Australian guy, were like, why don't we have him just turn around and be like Zoolander, no? Like, whatever. And he was like, oh, I'll do that. So we delayed the production, of course, for 30 minutes in order to get that, but it ended up in the commercial, so that when he says, or whatever this is, in the background he appears in double exposure, which is a very simple special effect to pull off, but it was that kind of thing where everybody was looking at a detail. The bottle falling when he's in the beer ad, that's something that we were like, oh yeah, those beer ads where they just throw the thing down the thing and it just perfectly falls into someone's hand. What if he doesn't grab it? What if in one take it just goes, and that's the take we used. So there's a lot of things that we're like, during the thing you have to be like, is this funny? Or am I just doing what's on paper? If you're just doing what's on paper, you're doing 50% of what you should be doing. You should always be like, okay, so what's the funnier? How do we beat what we already set out to do? Right? So there was a bit of that. And now I'm gonna show you how the Old Spice one evolved. So this is, without special effects, more than a plate to overcome the green screen. There's a lot of yawning, so I'm gonna go real quick. Can you play it?
Hello, ladies. Is your man the kind of man who would take you on? I'm gonna tie it.
I like your pants.
Well,
So that was the original one.
hello, ladies. Is your man the kind of man who would take you on? I'm gonna tie it.
I like your pants.
Get off my horse.
Can anyone tell the difference? You, there, what's the difference?
Hello.
Someone raise their hand. Whatever.
There's all mine.
Is your man the kind of man who would take you on? I'm gonna tie it.
Yes, you are.
Get off my horse.
Okay, so as we were doing this, there was an argument on whether there should be any cuts. Should we reveal David through a cut, or should we try to do the Old Spice thing where we just pull and we reveal David as we pull? And it was. This is the kind of decisions that you need to make because it kind of takes you through the what are we gonna do in post-production. So the first thing we did is we decided that "Get off my horse" was the best joke to end that thing because "I'm on a horse" was his line from the Super Bowl 7 years ago. And what we did is we built everything around Isaiah. Whatever he was doing, everything around him should work. So his performance from beginning to end was the thing that was going to drive the edit. And then whatever David did had to react to whatever Isaiah was doing. So when he said, "You have nice pants," he was pointing at Isaiah here instead of here. And we had to make it so that he shouldn't point. He was so cool in the previous commercial that why would he be like, "Oh, nah." So we decided to go for this one. And here you can see that if you draw a neck, like a line on Isaiah, everything works around him.
So this was the final spot.
This is the final spot.
Is your man the kind of man who would climb the height? I'm in a tight head. Nice pants. Get off my horse.
So everything is timed around Isaiah. We even cheated David's timing. So David looking is delayed by a few frames that no one will ever notice, so that when he says, "Nice pants," it matches when Isaiah is saying, "I'm on a tie dad." So all of that, him looking back and all of that thing, is a kind of details that took us 3 days to figure out. Should it all be in one shot or should we cut? The client wasn't sure, our bosses wasn't sure, and 3 of them, the creative department, were absolutely sure we should not cut. And we just fought and fought and fought until we ended up with this on the Super Bowl. Someone stopped asking, I think, at some point. They were like, "Yeah, we don't care, just do whatever you want." And we're like, "Okay, fine."
So in the real world, you still pull all-nighters like you probably do in college. So this was 2 nights before, the night before it was due. So we shipped it on the Friday before the Super Bowl was on Sunday. That Thursday night, we ended up spending the entire night finishing all of the little details, all of the CGI that went into the final spots that the clients had approved. Wasn't quite an all-nighter because Daniel snored, so we all fell asleep at some point, but got them out the door by maybe like 8 a.m. to the network. Network's approved. Everything went off swimmingly that you had already seen during the Super Bowl, so we were thrilled that people responded. It looks like we're ready for something else. So the only thing we had left was the results. We have a case study we can show. That's what we've, so we don't talk anymore and bore you. You can watch one more video if you want. It's
Well,
2
do you
minutes.
want to start the questions? And I think there's someone outside who has a question.
Can I record this?
In the middle. Get closer. I'll come around with it. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yay!
Yay!
So you can continue.
We can continue now.
Yes, this is the last thing, but you're probably sick of hearing us talk, so we'll just play a video for you of how we've recapped it all and how the results were. We were obviously happy with people understanding it was our biggest hurdle, and then just the response afterwards from publications covering us, from people continuing to talk about it. If you follow David Harper on Instagram, people still comment on all of his pictures saying it's a tie dad, which is pretty cool to see.
Is this a Tide ad or is this another rewrite?
Is this a Tide ad? Is this one?
Is every ad a Tide ad?
Wait a minute. Is this a Tide ad?
This year, Tide won the Super Bowl by doing something that's never been done before, turning every ad into a Tide ad. This is how we did it.
Yeah, just your typical Super Bowl car ad. Right? Or a hilarious beer ad. But it's a Tide ad. What? It's a Tide ad. Look at those clean clothes. What else would this be an ad for? A razor? No. Tide ad. Cold, refreshing. Tide ad. So, does this make every Super Bowl ad a Tide ad? I think it does.
Within seconds, hashtag Tide ad began trending. Soon millions of viewers were suddenly questioning if every single Super Bowl ad they saw was a Tide ad. Then we took the idea further.
Hello, ladies. Is your man the kind of man who would climb the height? I'm in a tight head.
And further.
Sarah? Sarah?
It's a Tide ad.
We even hijacked the live broadcast.
Welcome back to another Tide ad.
It was so big that other brands felt the need to say they were not a Tide ad, including the competition, but it was too late.
Tide stole the show.
They kind of hijacked the entire Super Bowl.
Did you love the Tide commercial?
I said, baby, what are we washing our clothes with? If it's not Tide, we're doing it wrong.
This was the best ad of Super Bowl.
And I'm wearing a white shirt making this.
A Tide ad.
By the end of the event, we claimed 53 Super Bowl ads without ever showing even one single state. Because by now, you know it.
Whenever you see clothes this clean, that's a Tide ad.
We could have sent this, really, and that's it, but we came. Cool, that's it. Questions?
I'm not sure how many of you may are aware or noticed, but the tagline that you used was that adaptation of the historic, I don't know how many decades old
Yeah.
tagline.
Yeah, it's from the 80s, and we actually brought it back probably about 3 years ago in all of our spots. If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide. And then this for the Super Bowl is if it's clean, it's got to be Tide.
Did the Twitterverse notice that or not?
I think everyone noticed Tide ad, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we repeated it a million times in the Super Bowl, so we were expecting people to blurt that back to us. So many people.
Yeah. Go on.
How were you able to get the Old Spice guy to like get on board with the commercial?
He's still under contract with Old Spice, so same way as we got David, we approached them, negotiated a contract.
He had no choice, really.
But yeah, we collaborated with him. We collaborated with the Old Spice brand team, Wyden and Kennedy, that works on it, to make sure we were staying true to how Old Spice would do their commercials, since we did need to recreate it to get David in there. But
He doesn't
he's still
blink.
on board.
We learned that. It was like, we were with Wyden and
Part of
Kennedy, and we
his
said,
character.
what should we do? He never blinks. And we're like, okay, he never blinks. There's, okay. That's something we'll do.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you guys said was the funnest aspect of doing the whole project?
You first.
The shoot is always really fun. I think getting to see how everything is magically transformed, whether it's how a set is built from the art department with the production company to what we did with the CGI afterwards, I think is so cool to see. Like, even though I've known the whole time what this was going to be, to see it finally, the finished 45 and what was on TV is awesome.
I think it was shooting every type of commercial you could imagine from a creative standpoint. Is we get a car ad out of this, we get a beer out of this, but at the same time you're doing the you're mocking it, right? So there's a little bit of, it's not cynical, but there's a bit of a meta-ness to it where you're like, oh yeah, they will force us to do the beer slide, so might as well make fun of the beer slide, right? At some point in our career that will happen. I worked for toothpaste forever and I didn't get away with shooting the toothpaste mock commercial, but I would have loved to. I mean, the dentist would have come up and, you know, the guy would be like, it's a Tide ad. You know, so there was something there that we were thinking, like, how can we mock advertising? There's a little bit of that throughout the whole thing. And of course, then the details, right? That's the fun part. Yes, first.
How much pressure is there on you to do it again next year?
Now?
Yeah. There's pressure. I mean,
There's
we
pressure.
put pressure on ourselves to that we want to raise the bar every year, and our clients got such great response from their customers and from sales teams that they're ready for us to do it again.
So you've reserved the time already.
Media has not been bought, but we're eager to work on it.
Yeah, and it's a matter of will we come up with it also, right? They're not going to invest on an idea that's not as good.
Yep.
Yes.
So working with Procter & Gamble, they're like a big umbrella corporation that controls a lot of brands.
Mhm.
How's the communication between the brands underneath Procter & Gamble's like umbrella? Are they talking well?
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
getting along? It's easy to
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to?
That's right. They were super collaborative to work with other brands like Mr. Clean and Old Spice. We have a great relationship with our Tide clients, and
A lot of internet, like communication with like computers, or is it more like phone calls?
phone or in person. They're based in
Yeah, they're all
Cincinnati,
based in
but they're probably see them once a month for their senior clients. Yeah.
What does it mean for your agency for your ad to basically win the Super Bowl?
For the agency?
Yeah.
I think there's, from the creative standpoint, okay? I think it's something you want to do in your career at some point. I think a Super Bowl, right? I think you set out to do a Super Bowl, hopefully. like I'm from Peru. What are the odds? You know, like the mathematics of it coming to me being sitting near a Super Bowl was like 0 to a million. But you want to do a Super Bowl. Winning the Super Bowl with an ad, with a 60-second, that would be great. Winning the Super Bowl with a campaign that runs throughout all the quarters, that's really a luxury. I think that's how I feel about it. I think for the agency, you take a brand like Tide, you take a Procter & Gamble that is very innovative in many ways, but that maybe Tide is not the brand that you would immediately think is the most innovative, and then do something like this that puts the brand in pop culture. That's amazing for the agency, because it just proves that even though the relationship with the agency has been there for many years, the agency is still bringing the best they can to the client.
Yeah, when you were explaining what the class was to me and talking about how being a part of culture, I think that was the coolest part of this campaign for me, and the Super Bowl in general. My friends don't really understand what I do. No one really cares about advertising. Everyone DVRs things these days or watches on Netflix, but Super Bowl is the one time people are paying attention to ads. People talk about it. I've had people say stuff about Tide when they don't even realize I work on it, which is really cool to have gotten into culture like that.
Yes.
So going off her question, have y'all had like been approached by new like brands to make ads for next year?
The new clients have approached our company for interest in working as clients versus like just make another Super Bowl ad. But yeah, absolutely, it's gotten press for the company and could do great things for the agency.
I don't know if you guys mentioned this, but how long before does the board start coming up with like contracts?
We probably start over the summer, and we probably went until November until this idea was bought. So there's multiple rounds of totally different ideas. Like we said, we talked about stains for months and presented scripts with stains before we even got to this as a territory, and then multiple rounds of this as a territory and how you found the right brands, right genres to parody, all of that coming together. Yeah.
How many awards did you end up winning?
We don't know.
Yeah, it's award season right now.
It's award season.
So we got the Super Clio after, which we don't submit to it. They just pick their favorite, like you guys did, pick their favorite Super Bowl commercial. Yep, we've gotten the Coffee Award. Yeah.
Did Tide see a big increase in sales after the ad?
They did so this was launching their product Tide Ultra Oxy, so that only got on shelves right around the Super Bowl, so they did see a boost in it within the few weeks after the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Is David Harper found like some sort of non-compete? Like, could David Harper go work for Gain next year, for example?
Gain is Procter & Gamble. He is, well, he's under contract, so I think we have him through July.
Oh.
Yeah, so, and in general, like any of the other actors that were in it, they weren't allowed to be in other Super Bowl spots, they weren't allowed to be in other laundry detergents. As long as we have the rights to our spot, they can't be, yeah. Any other questions?
That's it.
Do you have any advice for them as
That's one.
students as they make the transition? But I'll have a student
They
answer
have
for
one.
it.
I was just wondering, how do you balance and like, as far as focus of advertising, like how much focus do you put on planning for a Super Bowl ad versus just the different ads throughout the year?
I don't understand that.
There's obviously a lot of priorities on Tide and lots of projects, so throughout the year it's probably more focused on that, but when we were in the thick of it, probably like December and January, it was very focused on Super Bowl, but we keep that on as a priority for us, maybe that 20% keeping in mind, like coming up with ideas of when we could do something above and beyond our day-to-day commercials selling a specific product.
So you've had two different paths to your careers. Jen went to Syracuse
Yep.
and was the outstanding ad senior and was on the ad team, those of you who are on ad team. So how did you get your job at Saatchi, and Daniel, how did you?
I'd say networking is super important. I got one of my first internships at Publicis was from my professor putting me in touch with someone, and then from there ended up working for that same boss when I got my first job at Havas, and then knew a Syracuse alum when I got my job at Saatchi. So I would say it's a really small industry. People are super important. That's who you learn from and have to work with every day. So that's probably helped the most in my career getting where I am.
I think it's a beautiful international career. Like it's a career that meets people from anywhere, clearly. So I went on a completely different path. Like I studied communications and media in Lima. Then I went to Paris and I worked at Procter & Gamble. because I wanted to be a client at that point. And then I realized, no, I actually wanted to be in advertising. So I ended up in Austin, Texas. Then I moved to Kansas City and I worked for Wendy's for a couple of years for VML. And then I ended up at Saatchi because once you get to a certain level of producing a certain type of work, you start looking for people who do that type of work, right? And Javier, who's our CCO, we had been talking for years, or it would be great if one day we get to work together. And then it just so happened that Saatchi was a place where that's what we should do. Write a lot. If you're going to be a writer for advertising, never stop writing. Don't sleep either. Waste of time.
Any other questions? Well, thank you